Okay. Is everybody ready? All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. My name is Dave Sunday. I'm the York County District Attorney. I'm here today with Sergeant Batcher from the Pennsylvania State Police. So we're here today to discuss the fatal shooting that occurred last evening in Spring Garden Township. I want to give this update in person at this time due to the size and scope of this particular incident. Today, investigators from the Pennsylvania State Police and from my office worked together to gather video, process the scene, and determine the chain and sequence of events that led to the police response that culminated in the shooting death of Payden Sells. I personally, along with members of my office, reviewed multiple body camera and ring camera footage. I also personally went to the crime scene to have a better understanding of what occurred. In reviewing all the known facts that are obvious and well documented based upon the video footage available, I'm able to relay to you the following is a definitive chain and sequence of events from last evening. On February 23rd, 2024, at approximately 11:10 p.m., Spring Garden Township Police responded to the 600 block of Colonial Avenue for the report of a domestic violence burglary in progress, where Payden Sells had broken into the home of his estranged wife, who was in the residence when he forced entry. Sells was armed with multiple firearms in the residence. A Spring Garden Township police officer approached the front door of the residence and requested entrance. Sells tells the officer to back off and then fires 4 shotgun blasts from inside the house at the officer as the officer ran across and dove off the porch to take cover from the shooting. Sells went to the second floor of the residence. 2 Spring Garden Township police then, including the officer that Sells shot at, responded into the house in an attempt to negotiate the release of the victim with Sells. While officers are in the home on the first floor, 3 more shots were fired by Sells while he was in the second floor bedroom. The Spring Garden Township police officers went up the stairs then to the second floor. While on the second floor landing, the officers engaged Sells in a conversation which included numerous statements from Sells to them saying, "I've got plenty of ammo," and telling them to stay back from entering the bedroom. The officers were then able to negotiate the release of the victim and her 2 dogs. A York County regional police officer arrived and proceeded up the stairs to assist, while one of the Spring Garden Township officers then exited the residence to talk with the victim. Due to the nature of shots being fired at the police, Spring Garden Township Police requested officers from surrounding available departments to assist. Numerous surrounding agencies responded, to include the Pennsylvania State Police, Spring and Sperry Township, the West Manchester Police, West York Borough Police, the York City Police Department, York County Regional Police, and members of the York County Quick Response Team. And those are trained officers that then assume tactical control of the positioning of law enforcement at the scene. Tactical officers on the scene recommended that the officers inside the residence be withdrawn to address safety concerns. While officers maintained the perimeter, Sells fired multiple shots through a second floor window in the direction at the officers on the scene. Less than a minute later, Sells exited through the front door armed with multiple firearms and was instructed to drop his gun. Sells then fired at least 1 handgun in the direction of officers on the scene. Immediately, law enforcement returned fire, striking and killing Sells. Once the threat was neutralized, commands went out to officers to cease fire, and all law enforcement immediately stopped discharging their firearms. Police approached Sells and located multiple handguns at his person. Police then entered the house to secure the scene. Upon entry into the home, police immediately located a shotgun on the kitchen floor, consistent with the firearm that initially discharged at the Spring Garden Township police officer. Investigators also observed a shotgun and shotgun damage consistent with the discharged shotgun to the front of the door and front-facing window of the residence, which is also consistent with the 4 shotgun blasts at the Spring Garden Township officer. Officers also located discharged casings and live rounds on the floor of the second floor bedroom where Sells fired through the window. The presence of live rounds is consistent with Sells attempting to reload the handguns, like the one found around his person on the front porch. There are aspects of this investigation that are ongoing. For instance, there will be an autopsy performed on Sells, ballistic examination, interviews, and phone extractions that will occur in this matter. However, the video evidence is clear and decisive. Sells fired weapons at law enforcement, including shotgun blasts towards a Spring Garden Township police officer that amounted to an ambush. Under any definition of justification in the law, the shooting death by law enforcement was absolutely necessary in order for officers to neutralize the threat and protect themselves and others from potential serious bodily injury or death. Sells' intent was clear by his actions and words. He posed an extreme threat of deadly force towards all members of law enforcement at the scene and potentially innocent civilians in the neighborhood, justifying law enforcement's use of deadly force against Sells. I do want to touch on two additional points. First, domestic violence remains a scourge on our society. We must remain vigilant in protecting victims of domestic violence. This incident highlights how domestic violence offenders pose a grave risk to the victims and members of law enforcement in responding to these calls. Second, this incident again highlights the unbelievably important role that police officers play in our society. The absolute brave nature of the actions that took place are something that we should be proud of as a society and as a community. An officer that was fired at multiple times, after being fired at, ran into a home to do everything he could to protect the victim of domestic violence, and in doing so, put his life in danger. We must support police and remember that we have to appreciate the fact that they put their life on the line for us every single day. That's it. Any questions? I may not be able to answer them. I'll do my best because it is an ongoing investigation.
So you're saying 3 weapons in total, shotgun and 2 handguns?
Yes. Yes.
Did Mr. Sells have a history of charges similar to domestic violence?
What I can say at this point is that he does have a criminal record. All right.
Officers injured?
No officers were shot during the course of this incident.
Do you know when the autopsy will be performed?
Typically, it'll be performed within the next few days.
Later in the investigation, would any of the body cam footage be released to the public and or media?
You would have to go directly through the police departments that we named.
When it comes to the victim involved, have they been displaced to like a family member? Have they been displaced?
What I can say is that we have connected that individual with all of the available resources that are available for a victim in circumstances such as this.
How quickly did this all happen? Like, what is, I know that
Yeah.
you know the time that you all were called, but then what time did everything end?
Well, without looking specifically at the time, I can tell you that from the time that officers were dispatched until Mr. Sells was shot by police would have been probably about 20 minutes, around 20 minutes. Around 20 minutes. All right. All right. Thank you, everybody.